Well, first of all, what in the world do we mean by organizing for reliability? And so I'm going to draw on a personal experience very similar to the experience every one of you has, I'm sure. Depending on the time of year, I either live in Phoenix or Olympia, Washington. This time of year, I'm a snowbird, so I'm in Phoenix. And so when I'm in Phoenix taking a trip, I've got about a 41-mile trip from my house to the airport. When I'm in Olympia, it's about a 45-mile trip. Both trips are on freeways all the way. And every time I have to figure out, okay, how much time should I allow to get to the airport on time to get through security, et cetera, et cetera. Are there going to be any crashes? How long is the crash going to be? Is it going to block? Are there any work zones I need to worry about? And when we talk about organizing for reliability, how well those work zones are organized, how well crashes are cleared, the scene cleared, operations restored to normal, is very much a function of how the transportation agency, in this case with a freeway, it's a state DOT, either ADOT or WASHDOT, how well they're organized to carry out those responsibilities to operate that system. And in the case of clearing an incident, as you'll hear with from Paul, there's a lot of other players that are a part of that, and how well they all work together is very much related to how long it takes to clear those incidents. So we really think that all these transportation agencies, yeah, we're operating the system. But one of the things that we've learned is, it comes as no surprise, no matter how good you think you are as an operating agency, there's room for improvement. So the AASHTO reliability tools around this category of organizing for reliability are aimed at helping an agency look at how they're doing business and figure out ways to improve how they're doing in operations. And it's everything from signal operations, work zones, the whole gamut. And there's an analogy here. Paul and I were talking earlier. His legislature in Tennessee is very much focused on wanting to build stuff. And that's pretty typical. And that's a legacy virtually all DOTs across the country is they're set up to build stuff. There's very much a long history of business processes that are in place, starting with developing a transportation plan, putting together a program and budget around that plan, doing environmental work, design work, and carrying out construction and so on to deliver those capital projects. There's very much a parallel with the operating side of the institution. And we very much need to have these same institutional processes and framework in place to successfully improve operations. So here's what the research has developed. There's basically 6 process dimensions that are strongly related to how well an agency carries out its transportation system management or operations, or TSMO as it's been shortened to. And I'm going to go through and briefly describe these business processes and then talk about how an agency can evaluate how it's doing against these various processes. First one, just going down the left column here, the business processes. This is the basic planning, programming, and budgeting. Very much clear process for capital programs, but there also needs to be a similar kind of process for carrying out your operations programs. Systems and technology, this is systems engineering, architectures, interoperability, the same ITS kind of stuff that people have been working on for a number of years. Next one is performance, and that's the use of performance measures. What kind of measures do you have? What kind of data collection? What kind of analysis are you doing with the data? And does it in turn affect how you're doing your operations based on what kind of performance measures or what your performance measures are telling you? The culture of the organization. This is everything from leadership, where operations stands in terms of how the agency thinks about carrying out its business, all the way to the legal authorities that an agency has. Organization and staffing, this one is pretty obvious, but is operations buried way down in the organization, or is there someone at a high level, senior management level within the organization that is responsible for operations? Is there staff development and training and so on, recruitment and retention for people with operations expertise? And next is collaboration, and that's simply how do you work with your partners? And in most cases, the most significant partner we need to work with is law enforcement, be it a state patrol or city, county, or police agencies and emergency responders. Each of these 6 dimensions has a level of capability that's been associated with it. And these levels, you can see here on the slide, range from performed to optimized, and these 4 levels of capability were really developed in the research based on observations of actual agency practice around the country. Level 1 is just the basic ad hoc, we're doing operations, we're doing okay, primarily led by individual champions in some part of the organization. The next level is managed. That is, there's a basic strategy, key processes that are in place. Moving up to integrated, that next higher level, you got standardized processes that have been documented. And then level 4 is optimized. And what we've really found is that there isn't anybody that's at that level yet. But that's what we're all trying to attain. But at that level, you've got a well-documented, well-recognized, high-level status operations program within your agency. You have a chief engineer that's carrying out the capital program. There's a similar kind of level of responsibility in an agency for an operations program. But what this tool does, and in Sharp 2 lingo, every one of the projects has got a L designation, and this is, we often call LO6. But what this tool really does is helps an agency conduct a day-long workshop, facilitated, but it's a self-assessment against the 6 elements and the 4 levels of performance to see where you as an agency really are, excuse me, and then develop action strategies and improvement action plans around each of these 6 elements to take you to the next level. There we go. Right, and Jeff mentioned the implementation program that's underway right now. AASHTO and FHWA have been working across the country on the Sharp 2 Implementation Assistance Program with a team of consultants working with 27 different state DOTs or local agencies, MPOs around the country to implement this LO6 Organizing for Reliability product. It's a 4-step process that is being, a 4-step process approach that's being taken to the implementation. And the approach is based on a number of pilots of these workshops that were done initially during the research. But what we learned during the research stage was we would go out to DOT, sit down with a group of folks, conduct a day-long workshop, come up with a list of stuff that needed to be improved. But the people there in that workshop were at a level within the organization that they didn't really have the authority to make the changes that were needed to move an agency up to the next level. So as a part of the initial outreach and marketing and approach that's being taken with the agencies that are involved in this is a senior leadership commitment that yes, we as senior leaders of this organization want to improve how we're doing operations, and we will appoint a team of champions within our organization to carry this out, and we'll support them as we do that. So that initial outreach has been completed. Meetings were held with each of the 27 organizations around the country with high-level people within the organization to really get them to understand that you're signing up for a commitment here that there's work needed on your part, support needed on your part if we're really going to improve how you're doing operations. So the next step is the assessment stage, and this begins with a team going into the organization and just learning more about what the organization is doing in the way of operations, inventory of their current practices, programs, policies, and so on. And then this day-long self-assessment workshop that I talked about. It's one of the mantras we use for this workshop is the answers are in this room. It's intended to bring in agency people and the key parts of the organization related to operations. In most cases, it brings in outside partners that are also working with the agency in terms of their operations, and then facilitates them through their own discussion about each of these business processes and each of the levels to figure out where they are. The next step then, as an outcome of that workshop, is the development of a specific action plan that for a given process, dimension, and a given level of where you are. Here are the steps that need to happen, things that need to happen if you're going to move yourself up to that next level. So that's the development stage where that action plan is put together. For the early adopters of this program, there's financial assistance to help with the implementation of the action plan itself, as well as technical support. And then over the long term, next few years, we'll be monitoring then in terms of how people are doing with the completion of these action plans and measuring the progress. Has it really made a difference in terms of how well you're doing with operations? So the kinds of things that are coming out of action plans in terms of things that are needed, support that's needed, is anywhere from training, peer exchanges, meeting with your fellow transportation agencies around the state, sharing information, just plain old technical assistance. Here's some state of the practice kinds of things that'll help you. Collaboration, build on the AASHTO Systems Operations and Management Subcommittee, and then tactical assessments to go in and review what's really happening. Here's a map that shows who's involved in the implementation process thus far. You can see it's a pretty good cross-section of states and MPOs around the country. 27 of them, 20 of them are getting a full financial assistance, but there was so much interest in this program. Basically, anybody that expressed an interest, even if they didn't qualify for financial assistance, is still getting assistance to facilitate a workshop and technical assistance as required as a follow-up. So it's really interesting to see what's coming out thus far from sitting down, traveling around the country, and sitting down with each of the states and MPOs that are involved in this process. So here's the numbers that are showing. This is a breakout of 16 different workshops that have been held to date. I guess you can start by the one on the right. It's completely blank. As we said earlier, nobody is at that optimizing stage. If you wanted to look at a general trend, I'd say you were at managed level 2. But what stood out to me is that business process, the basic planning, programming, budgeting stuff that needs to happen to support operations is at a level 1. Some observations that are coming out of these workshops. I prefer to take a glass half full assessment of what's gone on to date. You could look at it from the glasses half empty standpoint as well, but I think we've made a lot of progress over the last few years in terms of how we're doing with operations around the country. But there's a number of pioneer states or lead states that were sort of the first ones to get it with operations and have done a lot of work. And what we're finding now is many of them are moving up to that level 3, but they're sort of plateauing there. Nobody has really broken through to level 4 yet. There's growing recognition of the importance of operations by CEOs and senior level management of DOTs across the country. Our AASHTO Operations Subcommittee is chaired by the director of the Colorado DOT, just as an example. We've had participation from a number of CEOs and chief engineers at the AASHTO level in the work of the Operations Subcommittee. There's a number of organizations, DOT organizations around the country that have actually done some reorganization, looking at how they were organized for operations and made some actual changes in their organization chart. One of the gaps that's shown out or come out is the real lack of training for people in basic operations principles. It's not a standard program at universities around the country, but that gap is starting to be filled by the Operations Academy that has been ongoing at the University of Maryland, and another Sharp 2 product that you'll hear about this afternoon with the Regional Operations Forum, which is basically taking a part of the Operations Academy at the University of Maryland and taking it around the country and doing training on a regional level so that people don't have to travel to the East Coast. The MPOs seem to be a key to those areas where they really have broken through and done some planning, programming, and budgeting around operations. And then lastly, MAP 21, with its requirements on performance measures, has gotten a lot of attention, necessarily, I guess, by regulation, but people are now starting to pay more attention to performance measures, but we've still got a ways to go in putting together some basic performance measures and then using those performance measures to guide actions that are done by an agency. So if you're not one of the 27 early adopters, the question might be, well, how can we get more information on this? This is a screenshot of the AASHTO SSOM website that actually has an online guidance, either a 1-minute self-assessment that you can do online with the process I just described, or you can go through and do it in more detail in a longer time. But you can go on to the AASHTO website and actually play around with this thing and get a little more assessment or information in terms of how this works and whether or not it might be applicable to your agency. But if you are interested, you can use this website. There isn't financial assistance available to help you necessarily implement an action plan, but certainly AASHTO, FHWA are willing to help facilitate the use of this tool, and a long-standing history of both organizations is providing technical assistance however they can. So there are opportunities to use this tool. Gamada is going to talk about an enhanced knowledge transfer system that will show how you can access all the various Sharp 2 tools. This will be included in that. And there's a group of us that have been working hard between ITE, AASHTO, and ITS America and FHWA to create a National Operations Center of Excellence, and this will be very much a part of the program of the Center of Excellence as well. The other tool, keeping with the L designation, is LO1, and this one isn't quite as well developed and isn't yet really into the detailed implementation stage, but I wanted to give you an overview of this tool and what's coming before the end of the year. But this is more dealing with individual business processes within an organization and how you can assess those business processes and make improvements. And it's built off of some case studies that were done in the research. And the case studies, just as a few examples here, my old organization, Washington State DOT, had developed a joint operating policy document with our state patrol. In Kansas, the DOT there had to put together a special event management program around the construction of the Kansas Speedway in Kansas City and all the big NASCAR events that they had. Nevada DOT and Caltrans worked together on traveler information related to closures on I-80 and Donner Pass because all the traffic backed up in Nevada whenever Donner Pass was closed. But the research went into those organizations and looked at what are the basic things that happened, who were the enablers, what was the kind of stuff that went on that allowed your organization to accomplish what you did, and then built a process then that could be modeled by other organizations to do their own assessment. what came out of the research was just basically a report. So the work that's been going on since the completion of the research is figured out how we can put it into a series of tools that agencies can use. First one, this will be available soon on the TRB website because it's a contract that's being still run by TRB, but we'll take the research report and convert it to an e-tool, much like what we saw with the AASHTO online guide. You can use an online e-tool here with this one as well. Later, early summer, there's going to be a workshop. I don't think we have the details of that workshop yet, but it'll bring some people together to familiarize them with that e-tool and how they can use it to assess their business process strategies around traffic incident management and work zones and special events and so on. And then lastly, with the LO6 tool, where we have the 6 dimensions and the 4 levels across the top, there's a contract underway that will use this same LO1 business process framework and convert it to a capability assessment that agencies can use to see where they are, what level they're at, and what are the steps that they need to take to get to the next level around work zones, incident management, special events, and so on. And this is expected to be completed later this fall. So with that, Jeff?
Questions
you
for
do
John?
questions?
Yeah, questions for John?
Hey, John, like what you went over, I have a couple of questions. One, capability maturity model.
Yep, hang on, hang on.
I'm
I
sorry.
forgot.
Okay. Shall I stand up too? Okay. I have some questions on the capability maturity model. How many locations are actually at level 4? And the other question is, what's the incentive for agencies to move up levels? I mean, I know everybody's concerned about budgets and they've got other things that they've got to get their money for. How do we convince them that they should go and build up from level to level?
Well, the easier answer to one of your questions is nobody's at level 4 yet. The other one is the other answer is a little more complicated, and it sort of gets back to the basic question that we've been grappling with for a number of years, and that's making the case for the importance of operations, trying to get operations on an equal footing with the capital programs, and it's still evolving. But as I said earlier, we've got more and more senior level CEOs, chief engineers, senior executives at DOT organizations that are now realizing that we can't build our way out of congestion. There's been certain, as an example, there's certain bridge closures that have happened in the last number of years, last number of months, whatever. But those kinds of things have a huge impact on what happens to the traveling public out there. And so I think what you're seeing is agencies are now starting to respond to what the public is saying about the everyday experience that they have with traveling on the system. And you can't build our way out of it, so we need to spend more time focusing on how we're operating it. So that sort of question or mindset is slowly starting to build, and you've got more senior level CEO people turning to the organization and saying, hey, what do we need to do to improve where we are? So what we're trying to do with this LO6 tool is to lay out for each organization, tailored specifically to that organization, based on what the organization itself thinks needs to happen to move up to that next level. So if senior leadership is saying, I want you to improve, then you're in turn saying back to senior leadership, this is where we need your support to help us improve. And in the case of the early adopters, there's financial incentive or financial support to help them implement those individual actions.
And one more question for John?
Hey, John. I'm from Colorado, so I'm glad you mentioned Don Hunt. He's like you say, he's the chair of the SSOM. Two things you mentioned, the culture, that's very important because coming from Colorado, we have realized until we had the leadership at the top that's directing us to do it, really operations was kind of at the bottom of the pile. So Don has established like a TSMNO division, and that's all great. But my questions to you are, when you were talking to the DOT, did you talk to the the maintenance folks also? Because that, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about is also maintenance related. The second thing is with regards to collaboration, again, a lot of collaboration outside of the DOT is needed with law enforcement, the state patrol or the fire, the emergency crews. Just kind of give your perspective on how they were included, or just kind of enlighten us.
Well, the workshops are very much tailored towards what that individual state or regional organization wants to do. So the initial, I didn't go on any initial visits. Jeff, I think, went on a number of them. But the idea was that you went in and you sat down with the senior leadership and had that kind of discussion with the idea that a group of champions would be appointed to work with the FHWA, AASHTO, and consultant team to really figure out, okay, based on where we are, who do we think should be there? In some cases, it was internal to the transportation agency. In other areas, it brought in MPO folks, the law enforcement folks, emergency services, and so on. So there's no cookie cutter answer to what's going on. From a personal standpoint, I think very much, yeah, maintenance folks need to be involved. I never could separate out traffic operations from maintenance, and I learned that as an early part of my career as traffic operations engineer in Seattle. I couldn't do anything without working with maintenance as a part of it.
Great, thanks, John.